Good morning again, everybody, and welcome to our first webinar on the forthcoming Solar Market Parity Portugal event that we are doing for the first time in Portugal this forthcoming 4th of July. I'm Thomas Bonnicel. I'm the project manager for Solarplaza for this specific event. And today you'll have the pleasure to listen to Marco Alves and João Garrido, which I will introduce a bit further in a minute. So I'll just say a few words for a few minutes, and then we'll get to the presentations. So you got to consider that this webinar is going to last roughly an hour. Marco Alves will speak for about 20 minutes. Same for João Garrido. And then we will have some Q&As at the end of the event. Keep in mind that during all the presentations, you can send your questions online. We will also have like specific individual Q&A times at the end of Marco's presentation and at the end of João's presentation. So please feel free. Send your questions online. We will revert them to the audience. There will also be a poll at the end of João's presentation. So a few words about like Solarplaza and our event in Portugal. What's happening is the following. We've had like a very similar event last month in Spain. The whole industry is really booming in like Italy, in Spain, Portugal. We have very similar market parity conditions getting there. There are a few big tenders that are soon going to be announced in Portugal. And seeing like the reaction of the audience at our event in Spain, we've been like really overwhelmed by requests to do something in Portugal. And it was not a plan, but we've decided to react to this market demand. And this is why we just came like a few weeks ago with this proposal to make on July 4th in Lisbon, an event really focusing on local Portuguese market. It's going to gather like all the key attendees for the industry, industry experts, developers, banks, manufacturers. That's a perfect opportunity for attendance to just like show that you're there as a key player, network, listen to some news, broaden your knowledge about the local market, and just basically make sure you can grow your business in Portugal. You will see later, we have some links for the website. We've got like an advanced program online. I'm just going to take the opportunity to remind everybody that we have like an early bird pricing program, which is going to run until the 29th of May. So I really hope to see as many as possible from you, like coming to meet us and coming to attend the event. Keep in mind, you can spare your money and buy cheaper tickets if you do that before the 29th of May. Solarplaza, we've been like existing for now 15 years. We've just celebrated our 15th anniversary 2 weeks ago. We are based in Rotterdam. We're a company of roughly 40 employees, all of us from very international backgrounds. And our focus is really to just like impact the world, accelerate solar growth, and do everything we can to just like promote this really like great source of energy. We've done more than 100 events so far in more than 30 countries. And one of our key strengths is our network of more than 60,000 professionals in the solar business. Quick practical note, as said before, if you have questions and stuff, please shoot them through the question box of the webinar. And if you have technical issues, you can also like use the chat box. If you've arrived just a bit late, or if you can't not stay for the whole length of the seminary, don't worry, slides will be available afterwards on the website of the event. So, time for me to give the floor in a few seconds to Marco Alves. So a few words about him, and thanks Marco for joining us today and presenting your slides to the audience. Marco is currently the co-founder and general manager of the company MTX Solar. Marco has got like a very interesting cursus with a Master of Science and an MBA, almost 20 years of experience, and 2 key roles he's had. In 2010, he's been the founder and global head of Martifer Solar O&M and service business. And he decided to co-found in 2018 and then become the general manager of the company MTX Solar. Marco, we're going to give you like the presentation rights. Good luck for your chat.
Hello to everybody. Hello, Thomas. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm speaking to you from Portugal, where our office is based. So as you said, I've been the solar since 2010, experiencing different business opportunities across 23 countries. Well, majorly previous experience comes from MTX Solar, which was a service provider known in the market. So right now, today, I'm working with MTX Solar. So can I change the slide, Thomas?
You should be able to.
Okay, so right now I'm working with MTX Solar. What we are doing is we are helping the stakeholders of the solar business to make it happen. So after having designed, engineered, developed, built, operated more than 800 megawatts across the world, so now we are taking the opportunity of helping investors to make it happen in Portugal. So we are working on the utility scale, developing projects utility scale, in Portugal. So since March last year. So basically we are asked to bring to reality projects, not only utility scale, but also small scale. But I'm focusing this discussion now at the utility scale level. So, by the way, we are a group of experts from solar, also with competencies from the wind, that have worked for known relevant players in the market. But let's focus our issue today, which is I'm going to give you an idea of what is going on renewable energy sources in Portugal today. So where are we? Where are we heading to? And precisely right now, we don't have much solar in Portugal. So right now, utility scale, our renewable energy sources, well, they comprise roughly 600 megawatts of PV plants at utility scale. I remind you that Portugal has been very much consistent, though in a very smooth pace, bringing solar projects to reality. So there were options in the past, so there were licenses sold, so roughly 200 megawatts, but generally all the plants at the utility scale level in the country comprise roughly 600 megawatts. We have 5 gigawatts installed of wind, but you can see the high contribution of hydro of 6 giga. Then we have a relevant incorporation of 20% of gas behind this. So if you see the consumption evolution in terms of sources, you'll realize that nowadays renewables represent roughly 26% of the energy we have available. So coal here is one of the promises and the challenges and the opportunities for the developers of renewable energy sources. So why should we all consider to invest in Portugal? Why can we say it is so much attractive? Well, in the heading, everybody knows irradiation, one of the best in Europe. Well, when we see Germany with so much installed capacity, and if you see the levels of irradiation in Germany being below the 1700, when you come to Portugal, you can find it almost of the double. Furthermore, well, you can compare Spain to it. Furthermore, beyond the irradiation, the regulatory stability. I would say this is one of the most appreciated reasons for investing in Portugal, beyond the access to the resource, to the sun. We find in Portugal a very much convenient environment for investors really to apply their resources. So I remind you that we have never seen in Portugal any kind of retroactive measure affecting past commitments. And strangely, we have a center-left wing government, but very much committed to understand the rules of the game and what makes it attractive for external investors to come and invest into Portugal. So there is a strong commitment for all the governments so far to keep the rules of the game unaffected. So Above this, there is the demand. So energy prices, electricity prices in Europe, well, unfortunately, we take the second position in Europe. So after Germany, prices to consumer are really, really high in Portugal. So if you compare the continuously reducing cost of generation and on the other side, the consumption, what is the price for consumers for the electricity? There is a big share of value to capture by the renewable energy sources for the investors. So I would say that beyond the cost of the price of electricity in the market to consumers and the access to irradiation and the stability to invest, the regulatory stability, there is also the intentions of the government so far for the future. So if you consider that there is a program called PNEC 2030, well, it's an ambitious plan of the Portuguese government in which this government expects, well, it's setting, well, aligned with European revolution for the decarbonization of economies. If you realize, we expect to reach, coming back to solar and renewable energy sources, we expect to reach until 2030 for solar almost 10 gigawatts of installed capacity. So it means for 2027, we are talking about 7 gigawatts of installed capacity. So once compared to the 0.6 gigawatt actually existing today, there is a lot to be done. And there are ambitious plans set up by this government to reach it. So the PNEC, it's a very much ambitious plan. It has an overall there's an overall setup of actions determined by this government that comprises from installation of renewable energy sources plants for solar, and also changes in the transportation sector, for instance, so that it makes it very much consistent that we will reach it, these expectations for the future. So my main message here is there is a very much ambitious and complex plan, but very much detailed, over which this government brings to reality and expects to materialize these ambitious targets for setting up almost 10 gigawatts of installed capacity of solar until 2030. So if you realize it's among it, don't forget that Portugal, the electricity market is aligned with the one in Spain. It's called MIBEL. It's the Iberian market for electricity. It is correlated with the interconnection capacity between Portugal and Spain. There is an ambitious plan as well to, along these next coming 10 years, to almost double the capacity for this interconnection. So we have what they call of GRID. So there is a strategical plan for investment in the grid, which comprises as well enlarging this interconnection capacity to Spain. So where are we right now? Really, everybody is talking about auctions. Everybody is talking about the licensing process on the run. Exactly how much of it has been done in Portugal? So at utility scale level, well, data from closing July, a bit more than 600 megawatts have been installed. If you realize the big majority of it results from past plans of with incentives and subsidies given by the government, which were never drawn back. We have a very much small installed capacity for the CNI and small generation assets in which there were subsidized tariffs behind it, but those programs are majorly finished. So there are very much small amount of incentives for small generation power plants. It's called UPP. So pequenas unidades de produção. that comprises less than 100 megawatts. It doesn't represent much in the country. So right now, the total installed capacity, if you sum it all, you'll see it's below the giga with the utility and the small. So projects already in license as today. So please don't forget that the licensing process in Portugal is very much different so far from the one existing in Spain or the one existing in France or in Italy. It doesn't start by securing the connection. There are two licenses, if I may say, license to connect and license for the project. They are assigned to a single document, which is by the end of the licensing process. So you need really to start the process not by securing capacity, but really making a question and confirming if there is actually available capacity to a certain connection point. Then after confirming all the non-objection and consent and as well permits that may be required, as well as the studies for environmental, then you need to submit your request, and you can do it 3 times a year. First 2 weeks January, first 2 weeks May, first 2 weeks September, where you can request for a license for your own project. And only then you will compete to the same connection point with the other ones, with the other entities requesting connection to the same spot. So it brings a certain uncertainty to this licensing process until its conclusion. So right now we have less than 1.3 gigawatts already licensed in the country, of which I would say they are inscribed in an actual grid capacity still available of 3 gigawatts. But keep in mind, please, that we have had, we are seeing in the country a big boom of almost 5 gigawatts of projects being developed. But there is a very high mortality rate. Also, please don't forget that there is not a relevant history, past history of Portugal and local entities mature enough to participate in a consistent development activity for solar business. So it's a very new business, I would say, in the country still. The actual grid capacity still comprises almost 3 gigawatts of connections available. Still, there are some, well, if you go to the south where the irradiation is very high, you'll see a very big concentration and saturation, a big concentration of projects and a very high saturation of the connections available. But you will see a lot of capacities available in the north and mainly close to suburban areas with some high density of population. There is a long walk to be done. The country keeps announcing every year, and it's a public document. You can consult it, you can easily access it. Every year, the government approves an investment plan, a strategic investment plan for the grid. You can access it today. It comprises almost 1.7 gigawatts of investments being done in the grid that will bring new capacities for connection available. So you'll see that by 2027, we expect to reach this 7 gigawatts of solar. So you will wonder, where are the remaining 4 giga available for available capacity to connect? Well, I should remind you that in this very much ambitious plan, this revolution that Portugal is going on right now, there are ambitious targets of disconnecting the coal thermal power plants. So there are roughly a bit more than 2 gigawatts, if I'm not being that much inaccurate, but 2 gigawatts of installed capacity assigned to thermal power plants that will be released to the grid in the meantime. So which is also a very big opportunity for bringing to reality solar power plants. So right now, making it into detail, you will see that this 1.2 gigawatts of projects that have been licensed, you can find them, well, majorly in the south, center of Portugal and south. Well, it matches with radiations. Nevertheless, there is already a strong activity in the north, and if you confirm even in the actual grid capacity, you will be able to notice that there are already some power plants that are about to be licensed in the north of Portugal and even close to Spain. So where you can find irradiations with specific productions close to 1800, but okay for tracker. Let me be specific. So I'm giving you, sorry, I passed one slide. I'm just giving you an idea in the map on the right, and I missed this opportunity to be clear to you. On the map on the right, you can find the projects that have been right now issued for and requested for license in Portugal. The blue spots in the map, they represent projects that have been applied to DGG, the General Doctorate for Energy and Geology in Portugal, which is a responsible one for licensing projects. So all these blue spots really represent projects in the radar that have been formally issued to DGG. Nevertheless, they don't mean projects licensed. So coming back a little bit, I'm giving you a share, an opportunity to confirm how this development process occurs in Portugal. Now, this is about to change. The rules of the game are about to change. So rules are expected in the next month, and in 2 months, we'll have an option in Portugal. Well, a lot of uncertainty around the options. So probably they will reflect the returns that a project can have, the cost to connect to the grid, and even the different irradiations region by region in Portugal. So they will not be probably at a national level, but probably regional level. The government expects to be very much ambitious in determining the rules of the game. So they expect to do something very much different that somehow brings and recognizes the efforts done so far to license a project in Portugal. So making a distinction between projects already prepared, projects already licensed, submissions of entities that already have reserved land, or entities that didn't start with any kind of licensing process. So they expect to open it in a very much democratic way to everybody. So also, it is being announced, or we suspect that there will be some barriers on entry. This government is very much concerned with speculation, so we expect to see some very much ambitious bonds being requested for the ones applying to the auction. But keep in mind, we expect to have it and see it in 2 months from now. So we said that it's also very much interesting in Portugal for the actual prices paid for electricity. Well, as I said to you, the Iberian market for electricity, a lot of people talk about Spain, well, about the price of electricity, but don't forget, it's the same market. So these are prices, spot prices taken out from MIBEL for Portugal for yesterday, the 24th April, sorry. It's 23rd April. So this is really actual prices that were available from MIBEL website yesterday, where we'll see that we are seeing prices very much above the 50s, almost around the 60s. And when you talk about consumers, because there are a lot of people already trying to work out the sleep PPAs and working the opportunities of establishing a direct link between cost of generation and access to consumers, I'm giving you a rough idea of the naked price that the consumer pays for energy in Portugal, an industrial one. You'll see it's above the 60, right? So 60 euros per mega, and can easily arrive above the 100 euros per megawatt. So prices naked of an additional tax or cost to connect. So I think this is pretty much about it. So this is where we are today, and this is why it is so very much attractive to develop solar in Portugal. I should also let you know that for CNI, we have seen some activity, not that much relevant, mainly for self-consumption in the country. where in reality people are doing operational leasings, giving access to the result of the generation to the final consumer. But there are some still bottlenecks and some still obstacles in the actual regulation. But we expect a big revolution also on actual regulation and law applicable to it along this year, from September until the end of the year, as well as we expect to see it for the hybrid power plants. So a lot to come. So thank you for joining me, and available for any kind of question. Thank you.
Thanks, Marco, and thanks everybody for your questions. We received a number of questions already, and seeing actually some can be actually for Marco or João. Let's keep all those questions to the end session. We can also be more productive in that Q&A session. So without further ado, I will quickly introduce João, our next speaker. So João is the founder of Caparica Solaris. I'm sorry, I'm certainly not saying it rightly, but João is also a very educated person with a Master of Science and an MBA. He's got 13 years of experience in the industry and has done a lot of different things in consultancy, engineering, audit, and sales management. And earlier this year, he founded the company Caparica Solaris, which is focusing on developing solar PV utility for Portugal. So again, without further ado, I'm going to leave the floor to you, João.
Hi, good morning. So I would like to start thanking to Solarplaza and Thomas for the invitation. And it is also my pleasure to share this floor with Marco. So going through the presentation, I was asked to talk about PPA in Portugal, what is being done, the major trends. So I will start with a brief presentation of my company. This is a small startup company. We are mainly focused in greenfield early stage development of utility scale PV. So we are breaking ground in this market. We follow the three main guidelines for this business: advisory, technical, legal, and financial. And we are working directly with investors, developing projects between 20 megawatt and 100 megawatt. Going through the presentation, I would say that we can divide the PPA market into major fields: utility scale and commercial and industrial. We can think in others, but it's not so relevant. Going through the main ideas, as other countries, in Portugal, this is a new market. So everyone is trying to figure out what would be the best way of developing. It's still a lack of discussion, information, technical, legal, at all levels. So it is important to create everything from the root. So that's the reason why we are here and discussing how can we do it together. There are not much players as buyers and also sellers. Also, a note for the wholesale power market and the future contracts, OMIE and the OMIP. In the future contracts, it's not possible to trade longer than 7 years contract. So as we know, for solar, it's quite tight. We need at least 10 to 15 years of contract of maturity. So it will be important to have more players in the market in order to create more liquidity. And that way it will start growing and moving more contracts and more ideas. Another important part of this business, it's still missing the certificates of origin. So the green certificates, it's expected to come some legal frameworks on that, but it's still missing. So the PPAs will benefit with this effect, and it will be for sure a good push-up effect in the PPA market, mainly in the corporate sector. Talking specifically on the utility scale, there are some business done till today, mainly between international IPP companies and some energy traders, retailers, mainly new entrants in the market, and other companies that are trying to increase the share in the market. So some companies, when we talk about the power market in Portugal, we are also talking about Spain, because the Iberian market is the same, so the same spot market. So some companies are trying to put their fingerprint in Iberia, and they are finding this opportunity of solar developing to increase their share in the market. But we can say that this is just the beginning. The game is just starting, and it's not easy to see the trends. But one thing is sure, lots of things must be done, and that's the reason why we are discussing this. I will use some examples to show what is being done now. One of the most promoted projects, Alcotim Solar plant, is on the South Portugal. Currently, it's under construction. The IPP established a contract. It's not been disclosed information, just some details on media, but we don't know the tariff, neither the indexation. Usually it's inflation linked or tied with the fluctuations of the power market. But we know that is a 20 years PPA, and Audax, it's the off-taker that is buying the power from the power plant. Another project in Alentejo, also as Marco has presented, the blue dots on the map, it's South Center, a power plant. I don't know exactly the stage, but I think it is almost COD. So soon it will come online and producing. Also Axpo, that has been active in Spain as well, purchasing more power with the IPPs. So they have established a shorter PPA, 10 years PPA. So in this case, we also don't know the indexation, neither the tariff. About commercial and industrial. So I have been focused in this market 3 years from now, and I would say that it's still a breaking ground market. The big difference is the clients' energy. It's not their core business. So when we are developing PPAs, utility scale, all the stakeholders, they are energy experts, but in commercial and industrial it's not. So that's the first point. Another point that I have found out, many managers they don't have any idea what is this about. So it's still a long way of educating people what is solar, what is all about, what is the benefits, how a company can have a positive effect in the CO2 effect, also on pricing and savings. But if we analyze the numbers, if using as example the average commercial and industrial company that is being supplied from the grid at medium voltage, the price without VAT, it's above 100 euros per megawatt hour. So with the current capex pricing of solar systems and the radiation, in many cases I find out returns higher than 10%. So it's really interesting. Using as example supermarkets, big warehouses, that kind of companies, they have already the major drivers to have the benefit of solar. And it's still many legal barriers to do PPAs in this kind of business. But I usually advise to do behind the meter. If we go for the public grid, it will be much complex. So my main idea on this is to stay simple as possible, and staying behind the meter, we can have a straightforward PPA between the parties. And another point is considering the international standards of credit rating. Some medium-sized companies, they don't have high rating, so that could be an issue for some investors. I think it must be created more creative tools in order to have that middle tier market that could be really profitable. Now going through the wrap-up ideas. This is both for utility scale and commercial and industrial. That's the early stage market. We are in the beginning. The new entrants are arriving now. And once we create a positive effect, I think the market can boom. But I think that's crucial. New ideas and innovation will, I think, will boost the market. And also we have the historical part of the monopolies, then bundling process of all the power sector. It's going further, but many companies, they don't know that they can have competitors in their energy providers. So more information must be provided. And also the liberalization process, I think, has done a good way, but much more has to be done to the future. And that will happen with more players in the market. So we need more IPPs, as much as possible, more energy retailers. So with that, I think we can have a more healthy market with more solutions. And that's what all about. Liberalization can improve the market. And also, regarding to, there are some European Union regulation for the PPAs, but much more things must be done. And some kind of PPAs, there are, from what I have searched, there are more than 20 types of PPAs. and some PPAs are not feasible in some countries, major regarding with the legal framework. So that's the governmental part on the process that must be done. And going again to the green energy certificates, that's a crucial point to develop the market. And now just the final word about financing. From my information, I am not seeing much support from the banking. The major part of the projects are being promoted equity-based. So this is mainly a equity funding market. We also need more financing sources to help the development of this market. So it will be important having on board more partners, financial partners, to develop this market. But I'm quite positive about this market. I think we are on the right spot, on the right moment, and it's a question of creating partnerships and create this kind of forums as we are having today. So now I will leave the time for the Q&A and the discussion. Thomas.
Thanks, João. And actually, before the Q&A, we have a poll, so which everybody should now see appear online. So like everybody, please, like if you don't mind, just like give us your feeling and your experience on that. How do you think energy prices will evolve in Portugal in the next 5 years? Select one option, either an increase by more than 10%, an increase between 0 and 10%, a decrease by more than 10%, a decrease between 0 and 10%, or it's really impossible to predict. What do you think, João? What's your expectation?
So now I will work with my crystal ball.
And what does it say?
So if we look into the spot market, we see volatility. Now we are in a low point because on the last days we had huge wind production, but it's not what has been happening on the last months. We have been assisting to increase in pricing. I would say what I believe is that will increase. I'm not sure if it will be less than 10% or more than 10%.
Well,
using as example, tell me.
No, actually, you're pretty much in line with the audience because we're getting the results. 41% of the audience is thinking like you that there will be an increase, but an increase moderate, below 10%. Then 24% of the audience believe that the decrease will be between 0 and 10%. So all in all, we've got 2/3 of the audience who are thinking it's going to remain in a flat zone between -10 and +10, with still a majority of people believing in an increase. So it's really interesting and pretty much in line with what you were thinking.
Yes, so I've been involved in some PPA negotiation. And last year, I could say that using as example Spain, the reference pricing for 15 years PPA was 35 euros per megawatt hour, and it was a huge pressure to put the pricing down. But this year, the pricing is increasing. So the expectation of the players is that the price is not going down. So it's been reflecting. But I would say, even in Portugal, what is being announced for the public tender, it will be 45 euros per megawatt hour initial bid, and then the bidders will present a discount on the tariff. I would say that the reference pricing will to be in the range between 30 and 40 euros per megawatt hour. I'm talking about long-term contracts.
Okay, thanks. Well, thanks a lot for that, Joao. And so, as you said, let's now go for like Q&A. We're receiving a big quantity of questions, so I'm not sure we'll be able to like get through them all. Just before we get there, and indeed, because of the intent of time, I'll just say that now. Again, we've got like this forthcoming Solar Market Parity Portugal event coming in Lisbon on the 4th of July. We are going to have an early bird price valid until the 29th of May. So if you're interested, just like, please feel free, book your tickets like as early as you want. You can see on the screen now, like you've got like my email and my phone number. If you've got any question concerning like the agenda, if you'd like to make suggestions, proposal, like wondering about like more details, feel free to contact me. Big thanks, and they're still with us for the next 13 minutes. Big thanks to Marco Alves and João Garrido for being with us today, and having very like nice and instructive presentations. Thanks a lot to a guy in the shadow, but without whom we would not be able to have this webinar today. So thanks to Solarplaza's Marco Dorotal, who's really like doing great and helping us today. And without further ado, let's go through questions. So everybody who's asked questions, please don't be offended if we forget yours. We're just like receiving a batch of questions. I'll take them a bit randomly. Marco, Joao, please make sure you're not muted so that you can answer. Some will be like maybe more for one of you or the other. Some can be for either. Let's begin with a very interesting one, maybe more for Marco. In your presentation, you mentioned that the available capacity of the grid was like 3 gigawatt with a target of 7 gigawatt by 2030. So how is the government managing that remaining capacity grid? What's the government doing with that?
Well, the government is, the 3 giga, please consider that they comprise already requests for license. So there are already requests for license of projects submitted to take part of these 3 giga with projects. So don't forget that there is still a process on the run. There have been projects that have been submitted in September and January last, and that still did not reach the final power production license that will decrease this 3 giga available. So the government has been very much consistently looking for not to interrupt what has been the previous regulation, the previous scheme in place. So some of these 3 giga will be taken for those projects that have been submitted, and that for investors that really spend their resources applying for licenses. Additionally, what we expect to see is that they will bring to population, so they will bring to public what is the remaining capacity available and not assigned with projects, and probably add it up with additional investments. The government is trying to look for, let us say, in a kind way, for co-investors for this grid expansion plans that exist so far. So they will bring on the top of the 1.7 gigawatts of new capacity that will arise with new investments. They will bring on the top of it some of the actual grid capacity that has still not been taken. And probably the licensing process will remain as it is for some of the connection points that are not taken between auctions. So I would say that they've been very much wise in managing this process and not to create any kind of disturb and affecting the scheme that has been previously installed.
Okay, thanks, Marco. Anything you want to add to that, Joao, or should I jump to a PPA question for you?
Yeah, let's jump for another question.
Okay, actually, I'll merge 2 questions in one. You mentioned in your studies, Joao, that you've seen some returns reaching like 10%. Can you please specifically explain like what kind of measure of return you're referring to? And also, can you develop a bit, like in what way the green certificates will help to develop the PPA market, the private PPA market, sorry?
Okay, so going to the return, it's quite simple. It's the internal rate of return, the project post-tax. That's what I'm talking about. Now regarding to the green certificate, we can see for the corporations that they are involved in green goals, they have to purchase green electricity. So they only can prove that they are purchasing green electricity with the green certificates. So that's the reason why I told that the green certificates will help developing the PPA market.
Nice, thanks.
Welcome.
Question to the two of you, like there's been different numbers mentioned. There's a lot of rumors or like different articles and sources. So the big tenders that are expected, we can reach somewhere 1.35 gigawatts, sometimes 175. Tenders are supposed to come out now, but sometimes we read also like July 2019. So what's your expectation? Are there any information you expect to be shared very soon? And in relation to that, in terms of government influence, how do you think the forthcoming elections will influence the energy market in Portugal? And it can be to either of you, Marco and João, so go ahead.
Okay, so I can start and then Marco can follow up my idea. So this is a very tricky question because we don't have the information. I think we are currently in a gray zone. We have the old rules that will be cancelled soon, and the new rules will come soon. So a lot of things have been announced, but not officially. So what my advice to everyone that is trying to do business in Portugal in this market, it's better stay relaxed and wait for the official announcement from the governmental entities in order to avoid following wrong ideas and wrong expectations. That's my main message.
Are you in line with that, Marco, or any other advice, opinion?
Well, again, coming to you, even though we have a left-center wing government, the messages come to public or brought to public have been very much consistent. So we notice a big effort really to listen everybody, all the stakeholders of this business and this industry, really to really be able to compile and comprise all the opinions and all the interests on the table for making the business done. We see this government very much environmentally friendly, so very much friend of the environment, very much committed with reaching the targets and looking for third parties really to co-invest in the grid expansion. So we don't see it going back. We may see some differences in dates. We may see some adjustments in power and capacity being brought to auctions. That is true. But the Secretary of State and the Ministry have been very much consistent saying auctions around June and roughly around 1.3 gigawatt will be brought to auction. The model is still not defined, but we don't see it going back, never. So even though the regulation is not still properly adjusted, CNI is running, so it can only improve. And utility scale, well, we are also developing projects in Portugal, and I can testimony to you that the process has been running very much faster, very much recently. So this government is making adjustments to the times allowed for all the entities and public entities and organizations related to the approval mechanism and the approval process. So we feel the reality is changing and it's only improving, though a bit of uncertainty that has been brought by the change of the mechanism in place. But we see a lot of consistency in the messages brought to public so far. So we take it for serious. We take it for serious.
Indeed, and lots of suspense. I think most of our audience would really like to know exactly like what the tenders are, when, etc. So a bit of patience and we'll manage. We're getting very close to the end. There's a lot of very interesting questions. Some actually like very like complex also that I'm not going to ask now because I'm sorry, we don't have the time. And actually it's topics like, for example, legal aspects of PPAs, etc., that we will touch upon during our seminary in Lisbon. But for the intent of time, let's go for one question, which is actually like relatively basic. Maybe more for you, João, to get back. What's the biggest PPA market in Portugal? Is it CNI or utility scale?
So I would say that in the upcoming years will be utility scale. But in the second stage, I think that will be commercial and industrial. So it's not easy to quantify the dimension, but in this moment, in the utility scale, we are talking about energy traders, big energy retailers. So they purchase lots of amount of power. Then we have the corporate sector. But I would say, as I've mentioned, that will be a two stages market. The upcoming years, I would say 5 years, will be more focused on utility scale. And then as long as the companies start waking up for this market, that sector will be increasing.
Nice. Thanks. Good evolution.
Welcome.
We'll leave it there. So, Marco, João, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Audience and attendance members, sorry, thanks very much for coming. I hope we'll see a lot of you like at our event in Lisbon. Again, sorry for the intent of time. We've not been able to ask all your questions to the speakers, but so you have seen like their contacts during the presentation. The presentation will be put online very shortly on our website. Feel free to get also directly to Marco and João. That's one of our intents also at Solarplaza, just connect all of you together. So just like feel free, bounce questions to them, just dialogue, and make sure you work together to increase solar market in Portugal. Thanks again to everybody. And yeah, see you in Portugal and maybe hear you at another webinar soon. Bye-bye.
Right, yeah.